back in 91, like, so.
Well, even at
just
that,
goes to show what a tool Axl was.
When Hetfield burned himself as well, he was back playing like fairly quickly afterwards. And I remember, I think it was, I could be wrong now, but I think it was the guitarist from Corrosion of Conformity went out playing, or maybe there was people taking turns.
Yeah, there was Kirk Hammett's guitar tech. I think he was Metal Church or something like that. I think I can't remember the actual band, but yeah, I think he still tours with him. I think he's, but he stepped in and he played guitar for like 4 weeks or whatever while Hetfield was recovering. But Hetfield went straight back out singing with his arm all bandaged up.
I remember seeing it at the time. Like, it was a big thing at the time, like because I think it was like Michael Jackson when he
he singed his hair.
Yeah, when the paedophile god set him on fire. Stop your ways.
Yeah,
no.
But I mean, it happened the whole time. I mean, I think Hetfield broke his arm like twice skateboarding or something like that, and he was like straight out playing guitar again, fairly handy, even with a kind of wired up wrist, until the record company stepped in and they basically went, you have to stop breaking your fucking arm. You can't do it while you're out on tour. Break your arm all you want when you're not on tour, but stop skateboarding when you're on tour. And he's like, okay, all right, fine. So,
well, I think the thing is, up to the Black Album and then even afterwards, like there was not much kind of like detail. I don't like, say, in documentary style things about kind of like the years between the Black Album and Load and Reload. So does it get into that a lot?
There's not a huge amount, really, I suppose.
They just really took a break, didn't they?
Yeah, well, you see, the trouble was they refer to the Black Album as a divorce album because basically a lot of them got married sort of in the run up to that, and then a lot of them, because the Black Album was so hard to do, and they spent an awful lot of time in the studio, and it was a really tough time for a lot of them, and they spent, as I said, because they spent a lot of time working on it, a lot of the marriages crumbled around then. I think Lars got divorced, Kirk got divorced. I think Jason, I'm not sure about him, whether he I'm not entirely sure Hetfield did. I think he's been with the same woman for like donkey's years, and but I think they just took time out to just kind of recuperate and just kind of like regroup a little bit. After
then they came back with Load and Reload, people
were like,
I think it's some of their best albums.
I absolutely fucking love it. I think two of my all-time Metallica songs are off Load and Reload. It's Outlaw Torn and Bleeding Me. I think they're their absolute shining fucking best.
They're brilliant.
Ever.
They're brilliant albums, but I suppose the other period, because then you have kind of like coming up towards that with There's Some Kind of Monster, the documentary, kind of like really, really captured everything. But then it's between that and Death Magnetic. That's in the book as well, isn't it?
There's not a huge amount in that. It's the book really kind of, it focuses real super hard on the early part. It's like it's the formation. It's talking about Lars and Jane's getting together, how they circled each other for quite a long time because they didn't really sort of like each other all that much. It talks a lot about Ron McGovney. They ended up staying at his house for an awful long time. They talk a lot about Dave Mustaine. It's more focused on, there's super amount of detail about the early years, about that's what you want, really. You want kind of the early years, the slog, the sort of the trying to get it together.
Well, that's the thing. Everything else is pretty well documented other places.
That's the thing, because a lot of people know because they were in the public eye after that. I mean, like, you want to hear about like how they scrabbled to try and get $50 to try and record their first single. You want to hear about like fucking sleeping on a ratty carpet in somebody's house. That's the kind of shit you want. You want to hear about the struggle and kind of go, fuck, the guys, like, they had it tough. Like, I mean, I know Lars had a lot of money, but he actually...
The other thing, they weren't like supported by
No, Hetfield was more or less on his own, like, from a very early age, because like his mother died when he was only 16 and his father had fucked off long since then, so he was essentially out on his own, and he had to make his series of shitty jobs trying to keep himself going. Apart from that, Kirk Hammett he had his mother as well, but again, single mother, because his father was a bit of a dick by all accounts, and he was just out making it by himself as well. And it was, by all accounts, in the early years, it was Ron McGovney kept him going, because it was like his parents basically let him stay rent free in a garage essentially, and he was the one that had the car, and he was the one carting him around, and that was probably the main reason that he was in the band in the first place, is because he had access to, sort of the equipment and all the rest, and he tolerated an awful lot of abuse from Dave Mustaine in the early years as well.
I suppose if they ever make a movie, this would probably be...
That'd be a good blueprint for it, really, I suppose, because it gives And it gives an awful lot of the background into, I suppose, as well, sort of the machinations of the music industry, because it talks a lot about the various record deals and about the different producers. Like, I mean, it goes into the relationship with Flemming Rasmussen and over in Sweet Silence over in Denmark, recording in that studio, and, you know, sort of talking about the relationship with Bob Rock, and then further on with Rick Rubin and all the rest. And you sort of just the actual logistics of recording studios and how trying to build up the equipment and trying to get all these, you know, various moving parts to try and get them into one place to actually sit down and record. And, you know, it's a really good read of behind the scenes of how you actually have to work as a band to actually put an album together, or how you actually have to sit down and try and record.
A lot of that's all gone as well. It's good to have it's like a history lesson, really, isn't it?
It is, and even just sort of it gives you an awful lot of background of the actual scene at the time as well, because they're interweaving with all of the other bands that were in, say, the LA scene at first, which is where they were, and then obviously they moved out to San Francisco then, so they're in the Bay Area, so you see all of the Bay Area, the thrash scene coming up, and then, you know, sort of they're in New York for a while, so you have all of the different bands and sort of the different friendships that were formed, and how sort of one good sort of tour with, as a supporting act with one particular group, is going to make or break you. And then if you suddenly bring out another smaller group with you, suddenly you're a kingmaker yourself then as well. You know, it's really interesting just seeing all of this kind of stuff going on behind the scenes as well.
So I suppose what people might be interested in if they're thinking about buying the book as well, or kind of getting into it, is there much stuff in it that you didn't know before? There's
quite a lot, actually. I mean, like, I would have read a lot of various articles and various bits and bobs around. Like, if you're a casual Metallica fan, there's loads of stuff in it you will have no clue about. Even if you're sort of a well-read Metallica fan, there's still loads of anecdotes in it that you will not have heard of, and there's a lot of...
Well, that's the thing. Like me, you've been subjected, because I used to be big into Metallica as well. We used to live with a guy. I used to hang around with a guy who was like a fucking
king of the Metallica fans. So, like, I mean, we've sort of been exposed to Metallica stuff for the best part of 20 years at this stage, really.
30 years.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. So, I mean, like, it's not as if we haven't picked up a lot of stuff along the way, but there's stuff in this that I've been reading, kind of go, fucking never knew that. Like, oh, that explains. Oh, right, okay, never really realised that. And okay, right, okay, now I can see why that particular personality trait shines through and all the rest. But suddenly I have a lot more sympathy for Lars Ulrich now. I can see exactly why he is the way he is. I actually like him more as a person after reading the book, because he comes across as just a fan of music, and that's why he's so enthusiastic.
But they've always supported kind of like, you know, like small, like, I mean, we've seen him, and like, I mean, the band that they had on the last tour, Bacasa, like they're a brilliant band, like they're a really, really great band, but like, I mean, that's massive exposure for a band like that.
I mean, like a band like Metallica, they are kingmakers. Anyone they bring with them, they're going to get exposed to 60,000 people every single night. They're never going to get that kind of exposure.
It gets into Lulu, does it? The thing
very briefly. It does. As I said, it focuses really heavily on their early career, and it kind of rattles through. It kind of goes, oh yeah, and then they did Lulu, and then that's it. So it's not talk too much about that kind of a thing, you know. But very vague.
Well, that's the thing. It's so dense. Like, I mean, it is. I'm just looking at the book now by Mick Wall as well. Yeah, he did loads. I mean, he did like the biography of Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath. He did do a thing about Led Zeppelin. I thought as much. And Status Quo and Iron Maiden and stuff. It's Appetite for Destruction, I think, was the one that I read.
He talks to an awful lot of people who would have been involved with the band, so you get a flavour, a kind of a 360 flavour from everybody. So you get the good, the bad and the ugly, and there's very little ugly that has been included as well, so it actually kind of goes a long way to saying, like, I mean, even though, say, for example, when they were staying in New York with Zazula and the wife and all the rest, she was kind of saying, Jesus Christ, she said that these guys just came down, they drank us out of house and home, and obviously they're young, so they're just bringing girls back every night to bang in our basement, and it was an absolute nightmare because I had a fucking newborn baby. But she's like, what do you expect? They're 20-year-old young fellas let loose in New York for the first time in their life. And she said, Cliff Burton was the sweetest kid ever. He just came and he used to like read bedtime stories to my little kid, and he was really nice and he used to act so sweet.
That's the thing. I don't think you'd make it that far. Like, I mean, you have to have a bit of a grit and stuff like that to kind of like, you know, survive in the music industry, but I don't think you'd make it as far as they have if they were like
absolute assholes.
Yeah, the support that they get with things like. But yeah, so obviously you recommend it.
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah, it's very well written. As I said, there's pathos, there's like humour, there's insights from so many people within the industry and surrounding the people themselves within it as well, and various interviews with the actual guys and all the rest, because obviously he talks to them quite a lot as well. He's he interviews them down through the years, so you get to see how they've changed from 1981 to 2012. So yeah, quite a good read.
Well, yeah, so there you have the Enter Night Metallica the Biography by Mick Wall. Keep an eye out for it if you're a Metallica fan, and even if you're not, keep an eye out for it.
Even if you're not, it's just a good read. It's just a good rock and roll read.
And kind of like come back in another 10 years' time and Laura might have another book to talk about.
I'm illiterate. It took me this long to read.
From Enter Night to Enter, I was going to say shite, but not.
Enter shite.
But yeah, now on to some kind of like bands that were very influenced by Warhammer. So I suppose the question that crosses everyone's mind at one stage or another in their life is, what bands are out there that can give me my Warhammer fix? I know it keeps me awake at night.
I know, it's my constant thought.
Yeah, I just stare at the ceiling.
Mine too.
Kind of gone. So kind of like, yeah, so we went off trying to discover bands. Some of them I knew already because like myself and Margaret had been into Warhammer for a while. I know Laura absolutely despises it.
I love it.
Jen, I presume you're familiar with Warhammer at this stage?
I'm familiar with it, yes. Can I say whether I'm a fan or not? I'm still undecided because we have discussed it at length, but I haven't really looked into it as deeply as all of you.
I discussed it at length.
You don't understand. He's the emperor of mankind.
I've been dating Mark for a while now, so you know. I know about it, definitely.
But it's just one of the things, because funny enough, one of the things that got me into heavy metal and extreme metal back in the day was a band called Bolt Thrower, who were kind of like synonymous, I think, with Warhammer, because I think at that stage Warhammer were doing a thing where they were like not kind of like sponsoring bands, or bands had an affiliation with Games Workshop to kind of promote the stuff. So Bolt Thrower liked singing about Warhammer 40k. There, I think when people think of kind of like music associated with Warhammer 40k, they're always the first band or the only band that a lot of people kind of think of. I suppose the best way to describe them is that they're kind of, they remind me a little bit, well, I suppose they're death metal, a grindcore, I suppose some people call it, but they remind me of a mixture of like early Cathedral with some kind of like early Sepultura around the Arise time. Did you know about Bolt Thrower before this, Mark? I
didn't. No, I didn't. I honestly hadn't even really gone too deep into music on Warhammer before this, and I was actually surprised, to be honest, because with a lot of the stuff I'm into, you would be like, oh, is there any kind of fan base around that make interesting music? And for most of those, there would be, and for most of those, it'd be kind of wide enough where, like, for example, like even like down to Harry Potter, they'd have like you'd be able to find your death metal bands that play Harry Potter stuff, or you'd be able to find like very poppy stuff and everything in between. And that's obviously a big one. But Warhammer is big enough that when we were talking about it previously, I was just before this to go off and look for some. I was like, yeah, there definitely should be a decent enough amount of bands. But after I started looking into it, I was like, oh no, well, this is kind of the main one, as you were saying. And there's a couple others, but that's about it. And they're very samey, bar the ones that are kind of doing parody songs.
Yeah, it's very rooted in metal for some reason. Apart from that, there was, well, I suppose Bolt Thrower, maybe it was the whole thing, because with some of the first ones, maybe kind of like everyone got, but then again, kind of like, with Warhammer 40k, with the teams around it, there's no kind of like nice things in 40k.
No, there isn't. But at the same time, like if you look at other kind of genres, there's a lot of like games and books and kind of movies and all like that are kind of rooted in the same like evil kind of, or not evil, but dark, very dark, heavily dark stuff. And you'd see like a mixture of like metal or kind of industrial music or something like that. But this was just primarily death metal, like not even different like kind of aspects of metal.
Oh, you didn't go searching far enough.
I did, but like, I mean, like, it's like light death metal or heavy death metal. Like, I mean, like you can like try split hairs on the genre, but like most of it is a growly voice
Definitely.
and super like heavy guitar riffs.
Well, there was one thing, but it's just one song from a band called Bolt Gun, where it's
They
saw
like
that
their
one.
bolts.
what?
They like their bolts.
It's Bolt Gun. That's because it was fucking
And bolt
bolt.
thrower.
Yeah, well, in
That's
Warhammer
because the name of
40k,
the guns.
the guns are called bolt guns or bolt throwers. It's like,
Not just bolts, everything. They just like bolts.
You fucking Philistine.
how do you not know the weapon of a space marine?
It's because